Hi, I'm Bob Balch with the That's Jesus channel. We are in a book study on Earl Irvin West's The Search for the Ancient Order. In the last video, we looked at the explosive growth of the Restoration movement from two churches in 1809 to one of the largest religious bodies in America by 1870. And we saw the warning signs that men like Tolbert Fanning were already raising before the Civil War. Today, we are in Volume 1, Chapter 8, titled Early Efforts at Organization. Now, this chapter goes after one of those warning signs. This is not something that West is writing to say, and we're finally organizing. No, this is not that. It is the question that more than any other would eventually divide the brotherhood. It is simple to ask, it is hard to answer. If the New Testament is our only authority and the only church organization in it is the local congregation, then how do separate congregations work together to do anything bigger than what one congregation can do alone? Now, we have to start with a scene here. We're setting this up. We visited this before in another chapter. The Mahoning Baptist Association on the Western Reserve in Ohio was the association that it's out as an evangelist in 1827. We covered that a couple of episodes ago. And through Scott's preaching, the cause had grown in ways that nobody had even predicted before. It was never seen anything like that before. But by 1830, many of the brethren had a hard question. Was an association like this scriptural? Basically, they're looking at creating a third party so that churches could work together through this third party to accomplish something. They did not see anything like it in the New Testament. Some of them had also come into the Restoration from Baptists, where they had seen what associations could become. They could become controlling and demanding and ecclesiastical, right? The Mahoning Association met that August in Austintown, and the meeting opened with songs and exhortations and prayers. And then a preacher named John Henry stood up and he said, "I charge you to look out what you are about to do here. We want nothing here which the word of the Lord will not sanction." And then he sat down, and a few moments later, he stood up again and he made a motion that the association would be dissolved. This is the Mahoning association, right? And he's asking that the association that they're in right there be dissolved. And the motion carried. Now, Alexander Campbell was not pleased that the Mahoning Association was dissolved. He sensed how strongly the brethren felt, and they just silently went along with the motion. But after the dissolution, it was dissolved, he stood up and he asked the question that would haunt the next 60 years of the Restoration movement. He said this, "Brethren, what now are you going to do? Are you never going to meet again?" And then a hush fell over the audience. So Campbell suggested that the brethren still meet annually, not as an association, but just to preach the gospel and to encourage one another and hear reports on how the cause was progressing. And they agreed. And out of that suggestion grew what came to be called cooperation meetings. Cooperation meetings. The basic idea was simple. A group of churches in a region would send messengers, not delegates, no, not delegates, messengers to a meeting once a year. And the messengers would talk about how to work together to spread the gospel. They would pool their money to support evangelists. They would assign evangelists to areas that had no preaching. Then they would go home. I mean, it was pretty simple. The cooperation had no authority over any congregation at all. It just made recommendations, not laws. And the brethren who promoted cooperation meetings were always careful to explain what they were not. They were not designed to make laws for churches. They were not creeds. They could not excommunicate any congregation. They had no authority to enforce anything that they decided. They were simply consultations. So an editor named J. Eichbaum, writing in 1850, listed 19 things that cooperation meetings were and were not. The list was so long because so many people were nervous about these things. There was a real fear among many of the brethren that the same machinery that they had just escaped from, the Baptist associations and the Presbyterian synods and the conferences, that it was being built again under a new name. That's where their fears were. But were those fears reasonable? And that all depended on who you asked. By 1841, Alexander Campbell believed that the time had come for something bigger than regional cooperation meetings. He wrote that the Brethren's organization and discipline were greatly defective. He believed that they were not meeting the demands of the times. He called for what he termed a more thorough and profound confederation. He wanted a brotherhood-wide organization. Well, Campbell's argument was like this: the church has a job to do, convert the world. And that job is bigger than any one congregation can do alone. So, congregations have to cooperate. The New Testament does not give a specific plan for how this is supposed to be done. Therefore, the church is free to devise any plan that it wants to on the basis of expediency, as long as it stays within reason. Campbell laid out 5 of his reasons for organization. Without cooperation, the brethren could not effectively distribute Bibles. Without cooperation, they could not do mission work at home or abroad. Without cooperation, they could not improve the ministry. Without cooperation, they could not protect the churches from the impostors and frauds who were taking advantage of the brethren's generosity. And without cooperation, they could not concentrate the action of tens of thousands of disciples in any great Christian effort. All 5 points sounded reasonable. They do sound reasonable. Let's be honest. Many brethren agreed with them. But there was a deeper problem in the way that Campbell was thinking. And that problem would haunt the brotherhood for decades. Campbell started his argument from a particular idea about the church. He said that the New Testament uses the word church in 2 senses. There is the local congregation, and there's the church in the universal sense, meaning all baptized believers everywhere. He said that since the church in the aggregate has the responsibility to convert the world, and since Jesus left no specific plan for how that aggregate church is to function, the aggregate church is free to devise its own plan. He saw his opponents saw this like this. They saw the problem at once, right? The church universal in the New Testament had only one set of officers, the apostles. And the apostles were the personal ambassadors of Jesus for the founding of the entire church. When the last apostle died, the only church organization left in Scripture was the local congregation. There was no universal organization for the worldwide church to plug into. The only church that the New Testament gives us in any organized sense is the local church. So an anonymous writer answered Alexander Campbell directly. He said that Campbell was inventing a new kind of church, a district church, a regional church, a national church. The New Testament knew nothing about any of those. And he said this superimposed organization could only govern itself and the churches under it by the iron grasp of a pope or an emperor. He said the whole idea was a complete abandonment of New Testament Christianity. Some applicants, he said, had written to Campbell asking what kind of organization to use. They did not yet know that they already had an organization in the local congregation. So, great letter. They did not need another one at the hand of any man. Campbell pressed on anyway, in spite of that letter. T.M. Henley wrote a careful response to Campbell's plan as well. Henley said that the principle of cooperation with all of its presidents and secretaries and districts, it looked too much like what the Baptists had started with. And the Baptist system, he said, had become the scourge of the peace of society. Henley offered a simpler way. When a church wants to send out an evangelist and cannot afford to support him alone, it invites neighboring churches to help. And the neighboring churches They send members to a meeting on a set day. The host church's elders lead the meeting and explain what is needed. The other churches pledge to help. They agree on the man that they want to send and the field that he will work in, and they appoint a brother to receive the money and pay it out to the evangelist quarterly, and he gives them an annual accounting. That was his idea, right? Henley said this was cooperation. This was real cooperation. It was simple. It needed no presidents, no secretaries, no constitutions, and there was no danger of running into the methods of those sects out there, like the Baptists and the Presbyterians. Tolbert Fanning watched the larger movement toward organization with grave doubts. Fanning, on every point, hastened slowly. He thought a thing through, and then he came to an independent conclusion, and he stayed there with his conclusion. He had yielded to the older brethren for years out of respect for their experience, but by 1855, when he established the Gospel Advocate periodical, one of his main purposes was to give the subject of cooperation a thorough examination in his pages. The church in Nashville had already concluded the matter for themselves way back in 1842. A group of brethren met in a meeting house in January of that year. They studied the Bible as if they had never seen it before, and they came out with 3 resolutions. First, there is positive scriptural authority for every religious work that is well-pleasing to God. Second, the Church of Christ is the only divinely consecrated organization on earth for Christian labor. And third, all other organizations through which men propose to perform spiritual labor tend to obscure, discredit, and subvert the reign of the Messiah. That was the conservative position, basically, in 3 sentences. But despite the opposition, the trend towards larger organizations kept gathering speed. State meetings, regional cooperations, district organizations, they started to multiply throughout the 1830s and the 1840s. And by the mid-1840s, Campbell believed the time had come to take the next step, to organize at the national level, to create a brotherhood-wide institution. Well, the first attempt was the American Christian Bible Society. D.S. Burnett, the man who had vowed during his 1845 illness to push that society system, he organized it in Cincinnati in January of 1845. The opposition to that society, I'll tell you, was immediate. Aylett Raines, editor of a Kentucky paper called The Christian Teacher, he doubted whether it would even work. J.J. Goss, a Virginia editor, said that the brethren should just cooperate with the existing American and Foreign Bible Society rather than start another Bible Society. Even Campbell himself thought the Bible Society was premature. He believed the brethren really were not ready for it. He thought the colleges like Bethany and Bacon and Franklin colleges, that they should be put on a stronger financial footing first. Burnett was stunned by the criticism. He had spent years defending himself. The American Christian Bible Society limped along for 11 years with very little support. It got off to a bad start, and it never really got any of the sympathy that it needed to survive. In 1856, the Ohio State Convention voted to terminate it and to just turn its funds over to the American Bible Union, which was a Baptist organization. And that was the end of the first general brotherhood organization. But it was not the end of the idea. Burnett was already at work on something much bigger, something he had vowed to push no matter what. And that one thing to flag before we close is this. So that's the end of this chapter. And I want to get you going, because the book kind of gets going from here on out. This has all been kind of a lot of foundation for the book. Notice how West stages this chapter. Campbell wants brotherhood-wide organization. Burnett builds the first Bible Society. The conservatives push back. West gives the conservatives the cleaner arguments, the Nashville resolutions in 3 crisp sentences, Henley's simple plan, the anonymous critic who called Campbell's scheme a new kind of pope. Campbell's case it gets stated, but the rebuttals get the punchlines, right? And that is a choice of West that he's making here. He's a historian um, on the anti-Campbell side of this issue. A historian on Campbell's side would probably shape the same scene very differently, and that's just worth knowing as we keep going on with this book. We're going to uh, end with a question. Um, are you are you trusting something to save you, or are you trusting the Savior? I hope you like that question. I really thought about it for a while before I came up with that. Um, but I've had quite a few comments on some of my other videos about that question, and I hope you like it. Tell me what you think about it in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. I'm Bob Balch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed.